Welcome to the JAMODI podcast, where we interview coaches and leaders to find out not just what they do, but how they do what they do. Becoming the best version of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. What's one quality you see in leaders that coaches need to have themselves?
One quality in leaders, you mean
In
like
leaders.
on your team?
It could be leaders in the coaching world, leaders in general. What do great leaders, a quality that great leaders have that, I mean, all of us as coaches, we need to have in our bag?
Yeah, I think vulnerability, honesty, relatability. Man, relatability is so important. You got to be able to relate to your kids, and your kids have to be able to relate to you. And so you don't want to be so high-minded that you know everything. You got to ask them some things, take some things from them, be vulnerable, be honest, but most of all, be relatable. I think that's really important. So that's why. So you see me walking around kidding with guys, talking back, laughing, joking. But now there's a time when that line gets straighter. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so they got to see both of those sides. They got to see where you can just let your guard down and just chill and relax and make jokes and fun. But at the same time, they got to respect the authority that you have, and then and follow your leadership.
I think it's good for them to learn that line too in athletics, because someday they're going to have a job with a boss, and they want to have a good relationship with that boss and get to know him or her, but they can't ever blur that line. I can remember in college a time where with a coach, I blurred the line and I talked to him as if he was a peer in front of other players. And even it still kind of gives me like, I feel a little bit flush. And it was just one of those moments where I just went too far with forgetting the level that he's at compared to what I'm at. I do think you use humor really well with guys. It's not as natural for me as it is for you to do that. And then that vulnerability piece that you talked about, of the ability to admit when you've made a mistake in front of players. And I think that goes a long way with them too. Instead of the guy that will just be so stubborn and not want to admit that he's done something wrong to a point where it really fractures the relationship between you and your team.
Absolutely. This happened to me last night. I've told you this morning. We normally at a junior high level, most teams play zone. They play a 1-2-2 or 2-1-2 or 2-3, whatever you want to call it, a zone. And I know you have this the new monster zone.
The monster zone. I'm sold out. Yeah.
Play zones. Very few teams, unless you've got a real solid team that's dominant, do you play man to man. And so this team last night that we played man to man. So we've only had 2 or 3 days of practice. 3 of those in a row were disrupted, but hey, what do we say? We just overcome. And so we didn't have time to put in our flow offense. And so basically I just said, well, if this happens, we'll be 4 out, 1 in, and just, dribble drive and work it out. Well, they did the very best they could with it, but we didn't have much success with it. And I totally owned that in the locker room afterwards. I said, listen, guys, we lost this game, and it was totally on me. Now, was everything on me? No. Was the turnovers on me? No. But I owned it all. It was totally on me. I did not have you prepared, and I will take the ownership of that, and we will get our man-to-man offense together, and we will be ready to flow the next time we need a man-to-man offense. Okay, and I believe they appreciate that, because it takes them off the hook for everything, because they didn't know what to do against man, other than they didn't know whether to drive, whether to stop, whether to pass, whether to take one,
Yeah.
And so I felt like I handicapped them, but we will be better for it going forward.
I think that it comes down to accountability as well. Like, you need to, as a coach, you need to be able to hold them accountable for the things that you've taught them. You know, like if you talked a lot about rebounding this week, so when they don't block out, you have the right. I'm just wondering how many times I've done it or coaches have done it where we're yelling at players and trying to hold them accountable for things that we really haven't either emphasized or we haven't taught. And so anytime
Yeah,
that, I mean, rarely, I don't know about you. I mean, you've done this way longer than me, but rarely do I see players just not doing the right things out of spite, or they just don't care. If they don't care, what are they doing out there anyway? But
absolutely.
most of the time they're making mistakes and they're giving their very, very best. And if the mistakes they're making, we have to make sure we're turning it around and looking, okay, have I taught them well enough?
Absolutely. There's a lot of things that we think they already know. Do we teach jump ball? Well, we get out there and do the jump ball. How many times do you go over that? How many times do you go over blocking out from the free throw line?
Yeah.
This year, I haven't taught jump ball, haven't taught, but those are all the little details you want them to do right. But if you haven't taught them and emphasized it, it's kind of hard to hold them to that. You
That's right.
can. A tough coach, mean coach, but if you really think about it, if you haven't taught them, you haven't trained them, you can't hold them accountable for it.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.